Alright, we're just going to do a dry test run on this video. Wanted to document my first computer build in the Cougar Conquer because during my research I found a lot of negative aspects of the case that a lot of the reviewers tended to present in a way that made it seem like they didn't recommend the case, and in some instances they didn't. And so I wanted to just add an additional data point to the reviews on the Cougar Conquer. I know at this point the case is probably out of its hype cycle, I guess you could say. It's been quite a few years since the case first came out. If you're remotely familiar with the case, you'll recognize that the version of the case that I have is the all-white case as compared to the original style, which is all black with an orange accent panel, I believe is the term. So a bit of history on why I ended up building in the all-white case. When I first started considering building a computer, the thought process began because I saw the orange and black Cougar Conquer case in a massive PC store with all kinds of cases and such. And I just absolutely loved the aesthetic of the case. It's such a beautiful design. The orange really pops. And I thought that I wanted to build in that case when I built my first computer. Go a few years down the road to maybe a couple weeks ago when I actually started building my own computer. And I was still planning on building in the black and orange case. However, when I started looking for parts, I ended up finding this wonderful Asus ROG Strix, what is it, Z690A motherboard. And the seller had a motherboard and CPU combo. And as you can see, this beautiful motherboard is all white. And then the price with the CPU, which I ended up going with a pretty strong i7 12700KF as my bundle. And the motherboard being white didn't really seem to fit with the theme of the orange and black case. Well, that tended to be a recurring theme with the orange and black Cougar Conquer. It is a beautiful case on its own, but it is really hard to find components that go well with that color scheme. Now, it's marketed as a modders case, and you can take that accent panel off and recolor it. But as this is my first build and I'm just living in an apartment at the moment, I don't really have access to the tools to make those color corrections. So I ended up starting to reconsider whether or not I wanted to build in the orange and black. And then there were the RAM sticks. Now, it is really hard to see. I don't know if I can actually get this on camera, but down there, that little chibi on the bottom has a watermelon, and it is just the cutest thing ever. It's the Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro, but that one, it had some chibi graphics on it, and the sticks are just beautiful. I know it kind of defeats the purpose of getting pretty sticks when you can't really see them, as well as perhaps in a different orientation, but still stands that the sticks are pretty, and even just the chibi being in the case makes me happy. So we had a white motherboard, and now we have white RAM, and I really, really started thinking about just going all white. So it was a combination of the parts that I started finding that I liked, and the color scheme of the orange and black case being really hard to build in. We got a little guest appearance by Athena. She's our ragdoll and still a baby. Very inquisitive, as you can see. So I decided to opt for an all-white build. That led to me... Come on. Sorry, hairy foot time. That led to me deciding to go with the Cooler Master. I believe the letters are different because I'm in China, but it's a 360 rad. I believe the US edition is called the ML360. This was called the B360. Same essential hardware. It's got 3 ARGB fans on the bottom, which I paired with 2 MF120 Cooler Master ARGB fans. Your head is not supposed to be there. Cat is very inquisitive. Also, while we're down here, you can see that I've got a nice RM850 Corsair PSU. And then this lovely little LCD display is supposed to be a GPU support stand with an integrated display. However, as you can tell by the orientation of the motherboard, it is not compatible with supporting the GPU. And the GPU honestly doesn't really need it. The Gigabyte 3070 Ti Vision, which I selected because, as you can tell, it's a white GPU to match the all-white theme. It's just the stand, those rails you can see, those are designed to hold the GPU support flange in just the horizontal position. So having a diagonal GPU is not going to work with the stand side of the screen. But the screen itself was why I bought the stand in the first place. Because as you can tell, based on this lovely case, there's not really a good place to mount a stat monitor conveniently. So I just have this nice little custom stand. It's not technically custom, I don't think. But I don't know of a comparable option on US markets. But be that as it may, it is in the case. Now, as for the negative aspects of the case that originally started scaring me off building in the case, one of the biggest complaints that a lot of reviewers had was the dust on this case. It is a very open case. I mean, if we take a look at the back here, there is absolutely no cover there, nor there. There is a wide gap all the way around. There's a ton of open space all over the front of this case. And to be fair, this case does have a lot of dust that is going to build up on it. It is extremely open to the environment. If you have cats, you're going to want to clean it. But you're not buying this case to keep the dust off your components. You're buying this case for the aesthetic. And I absolutely adore the aesthetic of this case. A lot of the complaints against this case boil down to you are choosing this for the visual appeal of the case rather than its functionality. It is a pretty functional case, but it does have some downsides to it. If you care about the PSU position, you are only able to install it in this position, where it has the back facing this little heat shield, and then I think it's the exhaust fans on the bottom. That is the only way that the PSU is able to be installed in this case. Whether you care about that or not, I don't. So that really didn't bother me. But one thing that does is that side panel. It is tempered glass. It is very solid. It provides pretty much all of your stability to the case. You take that side panel off, and it starts leaning pretty heavily. That top part starts going over, maybe like a 5-degree tilt overall. And if you want to have your side panel off and just have your computer completely open, it would be a very good idea to have maybe some kind of metal panel connecting these two posts, and that provides at least a decent amount of support. I've seen some custom builds that had that kind of a thing. As with being unable to change this accent panel color, am unable to make such a metal plate. But I do not mind the tempered glass side panel at all. The only thing that bothers me about it is very cumbersome to remove and replace. The 5 nuts, you've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those have to be screwed in by hand and unscrewed if you want to remove the side panel. So you kind of have to start with the top and then work your way down to make sure that you can actually get the side panel back on. And it takes all your hands and your feet, because when you get to the bottom two, you have to untilt the case. And even after you do that, you still have to like push on those bottom poles to get them to line up with the holes, because they still want to scoot up. So that's a bit of a problem. The final complaint with the case, and it might be a little bit difficult to see this part of it, was the cable management. In fact, I initially thought about not building this case because every single review talked about the cable management. Now, all those cables are tucked on the back. If we scoot this little thing around here, you can see. I would say that I did a fairly decent job of cable managing. Now, let's get some extra light on here. We can. What I ended up doing was I took a lot of the cables and I applied this, you can see it right there, this spiral sheathing. A lot of the fans are covered in that. The twin tails over the 24-pin cable extension go to the front panel I/O with the USB-C. Those, the fans, all that good stuff up on top is all in this light blue sheathing. The cable mod, I believe they're cable mod, cable extensions for the 8 pins for the CPU and the GPU and the motherboard. Those are more than just aesthetic. With this case, as you can see, the PSU cables do not reach. So while a lot of cases you can have an aesthetic choice to incorporate cable extensions, with the Cougar Conquer, it's kind of a necessity. But I would say that for this build, as long as you can do an okay job or you don't care about what the cables look like, then don't worry about the cable management too much. Well, let's go ahead and scoot around back to the front. One final note with this case that I need to mention is with this design and the tilt on the motherboard, if you're not using the case on your desk, you need to consider that angle. Another cat. Hello. The cables can be a bit tricky to get in and out once you've set the case down. If you've got it up on your desk, then it's not as big of a deal. But my current setup does not allow for that. Don't really think there's anything else I wanted to mention. But yeah, pretty happy with how this build turned out, especially for my first computer. I spent a ton of time researching it. And even with all that research, I'd still recommend the case, but I would also suggest doing your own research and making sure that the Cougar Conquer is the right case for you. I am thrilled with it. I love this case. I love the visual theme, then the way it came together. In a lot of the cases, it is your components that are the hero of your case. These components are not the hero. They complement the case. The case is the hero of this build. So if you're going to build in the Cougar Conquer, you need to keep in mind, you're starting with the case as the core linchpin of your design. But if you're perfectly happy with such a case, as my cats seem to be, go for it. This case is really cool, really fun. I absolutely adore it, and I'd probably build in it again.